Ever wonder why no ancient empire could match Rome's military might, even when they stole their weapons and tactics? You're in the right place to find out. Rome's army wasn't just about shiny swords or cool formations. It was a machine built on a secret three-part system that others couldn't crack. Let's talk about the first piece. The individual soldier. These guys weren't just fighters. They were disciplined, standardized killing machines. Stick around to uncover how their training and gear made them unstoppable, and why that was just the start of Rome's unbeatable edge. Ever think you could fight like a Roman soldier just by grabbing their gear? Think again, because there's way more to it than just swinging a sword. You wouldn't believe how much went into making these guys the backbone of an empire. Let's talk about the individual Roman soldier, the absolute foundation of their military might. See, it wasn't just about having the right weapons or armor. Enemies could copy the look, but they couldn't match the substance. There's a reason even stealing Roman equipment didn't level the playing field for other ancient armies. Now picture this. Most ancient warriors carried spears or swords, maybe a shield if they were lucky. Pretty basic stuff, right? So why couldn't they stand toe-to-toe with a Roman legionary, even if they nabbed the same shiny gladius or hefty scutum shield? That's the real question. You'd think snagging the gear would give them a fighting chance, but it didn't. And here's why. Rome didn't just hand out weapons and call it a day. They built their soldiers from the ground up, starting with raw recruits, often just farmers, and turning them into something terrifying. Here's the thing. Rome turned ordinary guys into professional killers with training so brutal it lasted years. Not a quick few weeks like you might imagine. We're talking daily drills until fighting became as natural as breathing. One ancient writer even said their exercises were bloodless battles, and their battles were bloody exercises. That's how intense it got. Imagine grinding through sword swings, shield blocks, and marching in full gear under the hot sun, day after day, until your body just knew what to do. Most armies couldn't dream of that kind of commitment. Their fighters showed up with whatever they had and figured it out on the spot. Not Rome. These soldiers weren't messing around. They were machines before the fight even started. Then there's the gear itself. Roman equipment wasn't random junk thrown together. It was standardized down to the last detail for maximum reliability. Take the gladius, that short sword perfect for stabbing up close in tight formations. Or the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to bend on impact, so enemies couldn't throw it back. And don't forget the scutum, that big, curved shield that locked with others to form a wall of protection. This stuff was mass-produced, not handcrafted one-offs. Every soldier got the same kit, tested to work in sync. Compare that to other armies, where one guy might have a rusty spear and his buddies wielding a club. No consistency, no teamwork. Rome's gear was the ancient version of a factory assembly line, built to last and built to win. But the real challenge wasn't just having the tools. It was the discipline to use them right. In Rome's army, discipline was everything. Mess up, and you're in for harsh punishment. Think flogging, or worse if you stepped out of line. But if you did well, the rewards could change your life. Land, money, status. These were dangled in front of soldiers to keep them hungry for victory. Imagine being a poor farmer one day and a landowner the next, all because you followed orders and fought hard. That kind of motivation kept Roman soldiers loyal and fierce. Most other armies, their guys might desert if the pay was late or the battle looked tough. Rome made sure their men had reasons to stick it out, no matter the odds. So, if a single soldier was this tough, how could enemies not keep up, even if they managed to grab the same tools? You'd think copying the gladius or mimicking the shield wall would close the gap, but it never did. Why not? Here's the mini payoff. Roman soldiers weren't just equipped with gear, they were conditioned body and mind, in ways no quick imitation could touch. It wasn't enough to look the part. Years of grinding drills, strict rules, and a system of carrots and sticks created a fighter who didn't just fight, but lived for the legion. Enemies could swipe a sword, but they couldn't swipe that mindset. No shortcut existed for the blood, sweat, and sheer willpower Rome poured into every man. But hold on, one soldier isn't an army. A single tough guy can't win a war on his own, no matter how well trained. Let's zoom out a bit and see how Rome took these unstoppable individuals and organized them into units that could adapt to just about anything thrown their way. What if your army could change its game plan right in the middle of a fight? That's exactly what Rome's units could pull off, and other ancient powers couldn't wrap their heads around it. You wouldn't believe how this ability to switch things up on the fly made them a nightmare to face. Let's talk about Rome's unit organization, from the early manipular system to the later cohort setup, and why it left rigid enemies eating dust. While we've already seen how tough their individual soldiers were, it's how they worked together that really set them apart. This wasn't just about having strong guys, it was about putting them in a structure that could outthink anyone. Now, Think about most ancient armies for a second. Take the Greek phalanx, for example. It was a tight wall of spears and shields, powerful when everything went according to plan. But what if the ground was rocky, or the enemy didn't line up neatly in front of you? Good luck. They were stuck in that one formation, and if things got messy, they couldn't adjust. It was like trying to play a video game with only one move. You're done if the other player switches tactics. Rome, though, they didn't play by those rules. Their setup was built to handle chaos, and that's where they started winning battles others would have lost before even drawing a sword. Let's start with how Rome did things early on with their manipular system. Picture this. They split their army into 3 distinct lines based on experience. The youngest, least battle-tested guys were up front in a line called the hastati, ready to take the first hits. Behind them were the principes, more seasoned fighters, who could step in when the front line got tired or overwhelmed. Then, at the back, you had the triarii, the grizzled veterans who were the last resort, often kneeling with spears ready to hold the line. This wasn't just a random stack of troops. It let Rome reinforce weak spots or swing around to hit an enemy's side, especially on uneven terrain where a stiff phalanx would trip over itself. Imagine being an enemy commander and realizing your one-trick formation is getting outmaneuvered by a system that bends but never breaks. Tough day at the office. Fast forward a bit, and Rome tweaked this even further with the cohort structure. By the time of the late Republic, a legion had 10 cohorts, each made up of 6 smaller groups called centuries. That's about 480 men per cohort, give or take, and each one could act almost like a mini-army. These units weren't locked into one shape or style. Need to spread out for skirmishing? Done. Need to tighten up for a head-on clash? No problem. The real magic of this setup was the centurions, battle-hardened leaders in charge of each century. These guys weren't just shouting orders from the back. They were right there in the thick of it, making decisions on the spot. It's like having a coach on the field who can change the play mid-game based on what's happening, not just sticking to a script. Here's where it gets even wilder. Rome's soldiers didn't just march in and hope for the best. They had the freedom to adapt, but it wasn't a free-for-all. A tight chain of command kept everyone in check, from the lowliest recruit to the top generals. Centurions could read the battlefield and shift their men as needed, but they answered to higher-ups who made sure the bigger picture stayed clear. This balance of independence and control meant a Roman unit could react fast, without falling apart. Compare that to enemies where every tiny move had to wait for a king's nod. They'd still be arguing, while Rome's troops were already slicing through their ranks. Historical records back this up with hard proof. Take the Battle of Cynocephaly in 197 BC against a Macedonian phalanx. The Greeks had their famous spear wall, unbeatable on flat ground. But the fight happened on hilly terrain, and Rome's flexible maniples, still in use at the time, split up to exploit gaps. One Roman flank climbed a ridge and slammed into the enemy's side, while their phalanx couldn't turn fast enough. Game over. Rome's ability to pivot crushed an army that couldn't think beyond its single formation. That's the real winner here. Not just raw strength, but smarts in how they grouped their fighters. So, if these units were this clever, why couldn't other nations just copy the layout and rearrange their own troops the same way? You'd think drawing up a similar plan on paper would do the trick, right? Well, here's the mini payoff. Rome's unit flexibility wasn't just about the design. It came from years of intense training and rock-solid leadership at every level, from foot soldiers to centurions. Enemies couldn't steal that kind of experience or trust in the heat of battle. It wasn't a diagram you could trace. It was a living, breathing system built over time. But even the smartest units can't win on their own. They need backup to keep going. Let's see how Rome supported these adaptable formations with a logistics operation that was pure genius. Think fighting is all about swords and shields? Rome's real weapon was getting food, gear, and roads to their armies, no matter where they were. You wouldn't believe how much of a game changer this was. While we've already seen how tough their soldiers and flexible units were, that's only part of the story. Let's talk about the army-level logistics and engineering that let Rome wage war across entire continents, while other ancient powers struggled to march a few miles without falling apart. This wasn't just backup. It was the hidden muscle behind every victory. Now, picture most ancient armies on a long campaign. They often starved, ran out of weapons, or just collapsed under the weight of their own needs. A few weeks away from home, and their troops were eating grass or deserting. So, why didn't Rome face the same mess, even when they had hundreds of thousands of soldiers spread across mountains, deserts, and forests? How did they keep everyone fed, armed, and ready to fight when others couldn't manage a short hike? That's the puzzle, and it's not about luck. Rome had a system so tight it made their enemies look like they were playing catch-up with broken toys. First off, their supply chains were a machine of their own. We're not talking about a few carts of bread, a hungry mob. Rome planned everything down to the last grain. They set up grain depots at key spots across their territories, stockpiling food long before a war even started. Mobile bakeries traveled with the army, churning out fresh loaves on the go. They even had medical support, with field medics and supplies to patch up wounded soldiers so they could fight another day. Imagine an army where a twisted ankle didn't mean you're out for good. They had backups for that. Most other armies, if you got hurt or the food ran out, tough luck. Rome made sure their men stayed in the game, no matter how far from home they marched. Then there's the roads. You've probably heard of the Via Appia, one of their famous highways. These weren't just dirt paths. They were stone-paved lifelines stretching thousands of miles across the empire. Troops could march faster, supplies rolled in without delay, and messages moved quick enough to keep everyone on the same page. Forts built along these routes doubled as storage warehouses and defense posts, so the army always had a safe spot to restock or regroup. Compare that to enemies slogging through mud or getting lost in the wilderness with no clear path. Rome's road network was the ancient version of a modern interstate, smooth, reliable, and built for speed. It kept their war machine humming while others stalled out. And don't even get me started on their engineering core. These guys were straight-up wizards with tools. Need a bridge to cross a river? They'd build one in days, not weeks. Facing a walled city? They'd whip up siege ramps or towers faster than the defenders could blink. Even on the march, every night they constructed fortified camps with ditches and walls, just in case of a sneak attack. Think of it as the ancient version of a pop-up military base. Set up, tear down, move on. This kind of speed and skill let Rome tackle terrain and obstacles that stopped other armies cold. While rivals stared at a raging river wondering how to cross, Rome's engineers already had a solution in place. There's hard evidence of how deep this went. Take frontier cities like Timgad, founded around 100 CE. Its design wasn't just for looks. It was pure military strategy. The city was laid out in a perfect grid, with main streets like the Decumanus Maximus cutting through the center for quick access to key spots like the Forum. Studies using space syntax analysis show these layouts made troop movement fast and easy, while also letting Romans keep an eye on everything. Long sightlines meant they could spot trouble from afar. It wasn't just a town, it was a control hub built to support the army's needs. Other nations didn't think this far ahead, Rome did. So, if logistics were this good, why couldn't enemies just copy them by building better roads or stockpiling more food? You'd think a few new paths or extra grain would do the trick, right? Well, here's the mini payoff. Rome's logistics weren't just support, they were a weapon tied to the vast resources of an empire. You couldn't match that without the same scale of wealth, organization, and territory to pull from. Smaller kingdoms couldn't afford the manpower or money to build roads spanning continents or maintain depots feeding thousands. Rome's system was bigger than any one piece you could steal. So with soldiers, units, and logistics all locked in tight, let's see why even the best copycats still failed against Rome. Their enemies tried hard to mimic the system, but something always fell short. Ever try to copy someone's success and still mess it up? That's exactly what happened to ancient leaders who thought they could mimic Rome's army. You wouldn't believe how hard they tried, only to fall flat on their faces. We've already seen how Rome's soldiers, units, and logistics worked together like a well-oiled machine. Now, let's talk about some historical attempts to replicate that military power, focusing on guys like Pyrrhus and Mithridates, and why they crashed and burned every time. It's not just a story of failure. It's a lesson in why Rome was untouchable. First off, these weren't clueless warlords fumbling around. They were sharp, experienced commanders who knew a winning army when they saw one. Take Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Hellenistic general from around 280 BC. He brought a serious force to Italy, complete with war elephants, and even used tactics that looked a lot like Rome's style of fighting. And guess what? He actually won some battles, like at Heraclea and Asculum. But here's the kicker. Those wins cost him so much that he reportedly said, "One more victory like that, and I am done for." Pretty telling, right? He could match Rome on the battlefield for a day, but he couldn't keep up the fight. Why? His manpower pool was tiny compared to Rome's endless reserves. Where Rome could lose thousands and just call up more troops, Pyrrhus's army shrank with every clash. Plus, he didn't have the supply chains to keep his men fed and armed for long campaigns. He was playing checkers while Rome played chess. Then there's Mithridates VI of Pontus, who gave it a shot in the 1st century BC. This guy didn't just admire Rome from afar. He went all in on copying them. Historical accounts tell us he had swords made in the Roman fashion, built heavy shields just like the ones legionaries carried, and trained a massive army of 120,000 foot soldiers to march and fight in Roman formations. That's a lot of effort to look the part. You'd think with all that, he'd at least stand a chance, right? Wrong. He went up against Roman generals like Sulla, Lucullus, and Pompey and got outplayed every time. It wasn't just about losing battles, it was how he lost. Rome's coordination was on another level. Their units moved as one, backed by logistics that kept them going, while Mithridates' imitation legions couldn't sync up the same way. He had the skin of a Roman army, but not the bones. Here's another layer to why they flopped. And it's not just about soldiers or supplies. Both Pyrrhus and Mithridates missed the social glue that held Rome's military together. Think about this. Rome didn't just draft people and forget them. They offered real incentives to keep troops loyal. Auxiliaries, often from conquered lands, could earn Roman citizenship if they served well. That's a huge deal, like getting a golden ticket to a better life. Veterans got land or money after their service, something to look forward to after years of fighting. This kept soldiers motivated, even when the odds looked bad. Pyrrhus relied on mercenaries who'd bolt if the pay stopped, and Mithridates couldn't match that sense of purpose in his men. Without that bond, their armies lacked the heart to stick it out like Rome's did. Historical records paint a clear picture. Imitators like these two could grab bits and pieces of Rome's system. Maybe the weapons, maybe a formation or two, but they never got the whole puzzle. The biggest piece they missed: the political backbone. Rome's military wasn't just an army. It tied into how their entire empire worked. They integrated conquered people, turning them into allies who fought for Rome, not against it. Citizenship and rewards created a unity that stretched across their lands. Pyrrhus and Mithridates didn't have that kind of setup. Their kingdoms weren't built to pull everyone together under one cause. You can't copy an army when it's tangled up with a whole way of life. So, if copying failed back then, what does that tell us about the real secret to Rome's dominance? You're probably starting to see it now. Here's the mini payoff. Imitation flopped because Rome's military was way more than gear or tactics. It was a full system, locked into an empire-wide integration that others couldn't rebuild overnight. No matter how many swords you forged or drills you ran, without the manpower, the social rewards, and the political structure, you were just playing dress-up. Let's wrap this up by looking at what this all means for understanding military success, then and now. It's not just about having the best tools or the smartest plans. There's a bigger picture to consider. Rome's army wasn't just strong. It was a system so tied to their society and politics that copying it meant rebuilding an entire empire. You wouldn't believe how everything, from soldiers to supplies, fit together like a puzzle. What do you think? Could any modern army pull off this kind of tight integration? Drop your thoughts below, and check out our other videos on ancient warfare for more. Let's end on this. Rome teaches us that true power isn't in weapons or tricks, but in building a machine where every piece fits perfectly. That's the real lesson here.